Hello, Green Team. We are starting our new series today on working an offer. Today, we will be starting with part 1 of 6. I'm going to walk you through all 6 pieces of this process. We are going from the period where basically we're working from the listing side, but I'll also talk through the buyer side as we go. But we're going through the period from when you receive the first offer on the property all the way through getting the property actually with final signatures, building a folder, and sending it off to everyone that needs a copy of the contract. So, walking through step by step here. First, we're going to talk about understanding offer terms and then go through estimating net to seller, evaluating multiple offers, then creating counteroffer, getting unique offers, and then getting an offer under contract. So today, on our understanding offer terms, we're going to talk about confirming the receipt, reviewing basics of an offer, and then the financing terms and any additional terms you might want to look for, and then dealing with contingencies. So first off, this isn't done enough by realtors and needs to be top of your list for professionalism. But when you are, let's say, first on the buyer side, if you're sending an offer, you need to send a text letting the agent know when you're writing up the offer. Hey, I'm writing up an offer just to let you know. That does your job to alert the listing agent just in case there's another offer on the table or something like that, or there's a deadline that you didn't realize. That way you can notify your buyer. If you're on the seller side, you expect that initial text and you're going to let them know that you saw the text basically. So next thing that happens is you finish up your offer and the email comes in to the listing agent from the buyer's agent saying here's the full offer, and what we really want in that email are a couple of the terms, a little basic outline of the offer with the full offer attached, in addition to the pre-approval letter and the earnest money check copy. And then what we want to do after that is we want to say in that email as the buyer's agent, we want to say, please let me know when you receive this. As the listing agent, as soon as we receive this, we want to let them know it's received. No matter what, good offer, bad offer, doesn't matter. All we need to let them know at that point is that it's been received. So they know that they typed the email correctly, didn't go to the wrong agent, it's been seen, and they've done their job for that buyer. A good rule of thumb is if it doesn't get that response within a couple of minutes, send a confirmation text if you're the buying agent and just say, hey, just making sure you got that offer I sent over on 123 Main Street. And as the listing agent, make sure we're responding to that quickly. Even if you're getting 10 or 15 offers, you need to make sure that you respond immediately to everyone that you've received their offer. Obviously, we're not talking about answers or we're not expecting you to have read it yet or anything like that. All we're getting is I've received your offer is all we're letting them know. So take that first step in professionalism by letting them know that you have indeed received their offer. Next, we're going to go through kind of the things we want to look at when we're looking at an offer and evaluating it. So in this scenario, we're the listing agent and we received an offer, and this is just a blank offer form, but I want to go through just the things I might watch for as I'm going through this form in just a generic offer. So this is the 7 pages that you'll see in Transaction Desk, which is really a 6-page contract plus a 1-page cover. And the cover is called the Acknowledgement and Confirmation of Disclosures. We've talked about this in a couple of videos, but this is just a confirmation that the property condition disclosure statement has been received and whether or not it needs a lead-based paint. It also has whether the agent is acting for the buyer and seller side of the transaction or not, listed on this form. Then down here, we're going to look and see what kind of financing addendum it is or financing it is. And we're going to see if there's any contingency in terms of sale of buyer's property presently under contract or not under contract. And I'll go through those 2 options here in a minute. Then we're just going to look seller and buyer name, legal description, that kind of stuff we can verify. But the really important part of the offer is really when we start getting down to what the purchase price is, the earnest money amount, and the closing date. So those are kind of the first basics we want to review on each offer for our seller. Then we want to come down here, check out inclusions, exclusions. I'm going to talk about that a little more in a second. And then the other key piece when I first look at this is I want to know offer price, closing date, and I really want to know this termination of offer. So I want to be able to tell my sellers exactly how long they have to review the offer and reply to it before it becomes voidable by the buyer side of the transaction. So the first step in reviewing an offer is kind of to get those basics down, and know just kind of the general outline. And I want to send those to my seller when I'm sending this offer. I'm going to say, hey, here's kind of the general outline, but I also want to give them some specifics about it. And the first thing I want to give them specifics about that could determine which offer they may choose is the financing addendum. So here they should mark which type of financing addendum is attached to it. And I'm going to walk through each of them real quickly. So this is the conventional loan addendum. So in here, it should have in this spot the amount of the loan that the buyers are getting on the property, which should be the purchase price minus the down payment, should be listed here. Down here is if they are requesting any seller paid buyer closing costs would be down here in additional provisions. And that would affect the seller's net on the property. The next thing I'm going to put in here the next type of addendum is the FHA insured loan. And this is what they've qualified the loan amount up here again. And almost always for FHA, this will be 96.5% of the purchase price, meaning they put 3.5% down. And the other stuff that gets filled out here is the appraised value of the property, which should be the purchase price. And then here we have two spots for closing costs. This used to be a thing in FHA non-allowables. As I understand it, that's no longer a thing. So you can put 0 here in the non-allowables. Down here is where you put how many seller closing costs or how many buyer closing costs that the seller would have to pay to agree to this offer. Meaning the buyers have their closing costs, the sellers are going to pay X amount of them. So if the buyers have $5,000 in closing costs, they may ask for the seller to pay $5,000 towards their closing costs right here. So these are not seller closing costs. These are buyer closing costs that the seller is paying that you would put there. And then everyone signs. There's one important note down here. This is in the event of a counteroffer on an OREC counteroffer form, seller does not sign. So you'll see these not get signed or signed incorrectly a lot of times. It should not be signed if there was a counteroffer. The only time this should be signed by the seller is if the original offer was agreed upon. And then this is the FHA cert. You'll hear it called the FHA cert a lot. And you'll notice both of the brokers, both of the agents have to sign this form, the listing and the selling side. Has to be signed on an FHA real estate cert. So that's the FHA form. Then the third probably most common form is type of financing contingency is the VA loan. And the VA loan is up here, which is usually just the purchase price. Most VA loans are 0% down. So you would just put the purchase price here. And then down here, you've got a space for closing cost to enter in how many buyer closing costs the seller is going to pay as part of this offer. Again, in the event of a counteroffer, seller does not sign. So same as the FHA form in this. Then the USDA, very similar to the VA in that it's usually 0% down. So this is usually just the purchase price. And then the closing costs are not actually a separate line here. And so they would be put down in additional provisions if you're requesting some. Again, in the event of a counteroffer, seller does not sign. So those are the 3 different financing addendums. And what we want to tell our sellers is, if any closing costs are being requested, what the down payment is, and the loan type, and then the concerns with the different types of loans. For instance, if it's a cash loan, or if it's a cash contract, it doesn't have a loan, which means that there would be no appraisal, which could be a positive for the sellers in that they wouldn't have to worry about an appraisal lowering the sales price of the property. Historically, FHA, VA, and USDA loans, since they're all government loans, have a little different requirements at the appraisal level. So they may have different things requested to be fixed by the appraiser. Also, there are different certification rules for FHA, VA, and USDA appraisers. So sometimes those are a little bit slower to get picked up because there's less options of appraisers that are qualified to pick them up. So there's just a couple of things we might tell our sellers, just to keep them aware if they're trying to decide between 2 of the exact same offers, but one is a conventional and one's a VA. For instance, a conventional loan is probably going to have a higher down payment. The VA is probably a 0% down, so that may affect how the seller feels about which offer is stronger. So those are a couple items. Additional terms that I want to go over from the contract that we might look at. So the basics are just purchase price, closing date, termination date. But some other things that might affect the seller's opinion of which is the best offer are the inclusions and exclusions. We've talked about these a bunch of times throughout Green Team, but these are all the items that should stay with the house. These are any additional items that are going to stay with the house. And these are any things that are going away. So in this inclusions, these buyers may be asking for a refrigerator, a washer and dryer, or other items. And that may affect the seller's opinion of how strong this offer is. A couple other things. Some people like to move back the time reference date or extend the inspection period. Those may weaken the offer in the seller's eyes because that gives the buyers a longer period of time that they can back out on the contract if they're not willing to conduct it without any penalty. So those are things that could affect their opinion of the contract. The only other items that we kind of check are title insurance is like 99% of the time it's going to be a commitment of title insurance. And most of the time it's going to be a mortgage inspection report. Sometimes on rural land or large land pieces, there's a survey requested, and those can get really expensive. So it can have an effect on how a seller views an offer based off of the cost of the survey and who's paying for it. So that's something you want to watch out for. The other thing is the home warranty, which is called the residential service agreement. So those can cost anywhere from $500 to $1,000. So that can affect, again, the seller's net at the end of this if the buyer is requesting the seller to pay for their home warranty. So these are all areas we want to make sure we take a glance at. And then, of course, additional provisions just to make sure there's nothing in there that could affect the contract. In general, especially when we're writing offers, we don't want to use additional provisions unless we have to. We want to try to find where it should fit properly within the contract, so we're not writing our own legal language here. We want to add the information that, for instance, if it's inclusions or exclusions, we want to put it up here where it's supposed to be instead of just writing our own language down here. And then we talked about termination and the other info that we would view here. So the only other thing we need to check is if there's contingencies. Again, at the top of your offer form that you received, they should have marked whether it's a presently under contract contingency, which means that them purchasing the house is contingent on them selling their house, but their house is already under contract. So it's just contingent on it closing. And the other option is not under contract, which means it's contingent on them closing their house that's not currently under contract. So real quick, I want to walk you through what those forms look like if you receive one of those. So first off, presently under contract, it'll say, here's the legal description or property address of the house it's contingent upon. And then it'll have a date here that gives them a date to get that house closed. And everyone has to sign this. And this is just saying this contract goes through, but it is contingent. The buyers aren't necessarily forced to purchase this property if their house doesn't sell by this on or before this date. So that's the presently under contract form. Usually that has very little effect in terms of weakening the contract in the eyes of the sellers. The not presently under contract has a much bigger effect because this means they're making an offer, but they still have to sell their house, and it's possible they don't even have their house listed yet. So it can affect the strength of that offer, and they're really asking the seller to take a little more of a risk, which is why usually when this is the contingency offer, the sellers don't actually take their house off the market. They leave it on the market during this period and continue to try to sell it to find a backup or what's called a kick out offer. So on this form, again, you'll have the property. You've either got it's now listed or it will be listed within 2 days of acceptance of this contract. So those are your two options that will be selected. And then it talks about down here your time period for removal of the primary contract if they get a better backup offer. So what this is the kick out period, which means if the sellers get another offer before this contingency is removed, they will alert the buyers, and the buyers have a defined period of time to remove their contingency, meaning buy the house without getting theirs sold, or release the contract so that the sellers can go with the other contract. So those are both of the contingency forms. So this is kind of just the way to evaluate a contract. What we're doing is when we get this in, when we receive it as the listing agent, we want to review it and we want to send a brief summary over to our sellers in addition to attaching the entire contract. And then we usually follow that up with a phone call kind of to talk them through it. And we'll go over the situation where you have multiple offers in a later video to talk about how to kind of group those and compare them easier for a seller. But this is more of a one at a time offer. If you just get one offer on a property, how to walk people through it. And we want to do our job and make sure we walk them through it. It is the seller's responsibility to read it. So it's technically their liability, but as their fiduciary, we have the responsibility to read it also and make sure we are explaining all of the terms and anything that may affect them or their liability in terms of the contract. So in the next video, we'll talk about estimating these offers to determine what the net would be to the seller if they accept any one of these offers. I'll see you guys over there.